Okay, so here I do have my skirt back and my skirt front. We now want to clean these up by tracing them. So I'm going to show two methods there. The first one is going to be physically tracing this with our new pattern paper on top. Just pin this in place. Sometimes it's helpful to go ahead and kind of mark your main points of outline, so just kind of your corners. As always, I like to make sure that my hem is squared from my side or center seams, just so we don't get any peaking or valleying on the seam itself. And here is my true center front. So you can mark your lengthwise grain line, but perhaps you want to cut this on the bias. So I'm just going to go ahead and like grid out a little box here so I can create that 45 degree. And then this gives us an additional option for a bias cut skirt. So other than that, we want to go ahead and trace out the front the same way, which is going to take a separate piece of paper. This method, I'm going to show tracing from on top. So rather than tracing from underneath, which I just like because it's a little more accurate and the paper doesn't get in the way, which I'm sure you'll see me choke on it here in a moment. Okay, again, I'm just going to pin things in place so they don't shift. Check to make sure you're square top to bottom, and then you can round through the curve. I'm using my French curve here just because I'm working with quarter size slopers, but great place for a hip curve if you're working on the bottom hem. And there you have your skirt front. So again, I'm just going to place a straight grain here. So lengthwise grain line, but I am going to go ahead and give this a bias option as well, just so we're all marked. I don't have to go back and do it later. So there's my skirt front and skirt back. I have not added seam allowance or any notches like that yet. I want to create my waistband first. Just get rid of a little bit of this excess. Okay, so to create that waistband, you want to look at the waist opening along both the front and the bottom. Oops, back and front, I mean. Getting ahead of myself. Okay. Just label those quickly. So you want to measure this. You can either use your see-through ruler. It is pretty flexible for this. You could also use your soft measuring tape. Okay, so I've got 1 7/8. Mind you, this is for my quarter size sloper. And my back is measuring about 2. So that gives us a total length for at least half of the waistband circumference, being 3 7/8. And you can cut this. I want this to be a narrow waistband. So if we have 3 7/8, you could do cut 2 of that, or you could double that to get 1 entire length. I'm gonna run out of paper. Okay, so if I only wanted to cut 1, this would go all the way around the entire circumference of the waist. And like I said, narrow waistband. And you'll notice this waistband here I've created is very straight, which is a-okay when you're creating a narrow waistband. If you have anything that's like a higher waistband or tall waistband, then I like to contour it to the body. But for this, it's completely acceptable to just create a straight line. Super nice. Okay, so I'm going to talk about seam allowance very quickly, and I'll try to demo that real fast as well. So I like to use a 1/2 inch at my side bodies and also at my waist, and then hem. Typically when I work with anything with a larger flare like this, I like to do either a narrow hem, nothing more than 5/8 is my preference. So I'm just going to map out seam allowance here, just for a good visual. Again, on a full size, this would be 1/2 inch. And I'm going to choose to go narrow here, so I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch. And I like to use the long edge of my ruler when I'm creating seam allowances. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. And a lot of the time I do like to place front on center fold, but since I'm playing with bias and we've got this added flare, it is a lot easier to panel it. So I am giving this a center front seam. Narrow hem allowance here. So imagine 3/8 of an inch on a full scale sloper. Okay. I'm gonna do 1/2 inch around the waistband. And this waistband will walk out exactly to your true waist measurement. If you wanted like an extension tab, anything like that, just plan on that in that measurement. And give this a grain line as well. Okay. And just to true everything up, I'm going to trace it in Sharpie just to make this permanent. Oops. And then I like to note my seam allowance 2 different ways. One is with notching, the other one is to truly just write it out. So I like to add 1/2 inch SA here, SA for the seam allowance. And that just lets whoever's cutting or sewing this know what's included in this fit. Okay, 3/8 inch. Oops, hem allowance here. And then last but not least, we want to mark this, calling out first the style name. So this is your added flare. Skirt back. Add your name, so I'm just going to write my last name here. And then a date is helpful, so just so you know what fit you're on. And then piece, we have 3 pieces here, so piece 1 of 3, cut 2. So you're gonna do the same thing here onto the front. You'll do the same thing for the waistband. I'm going to use a highlighter just to show notch points. So I know I talked about all of our seam allowances, our hem allowance. Another great way to note this, because you will not be sewing likely with your paper pattern out, is to go ahead and add notch points for your seam allowance, just so it's clear when you're looking at your material. It's a good reminder. And then I'm going to add, let's say I have real life, a 9-inch zipper that I want to put in here. So I want to go to the high hip. I'm just going to mark this 2 inches down from center back. I'm going to mark it with a drill point here. So I've made a circle. And that will tell me where the zipper ends. On the back too, and this really helps if you have a longer skirt, just to like add your notches here. And to be able to match up your side seams. Just only meant to draw 2 there. So add 2 notches to your side seam, 3 to the back, and then for your front, just quickly, I'll show you. You can either add 1 single, or if you know you have a longer skirt, I like to add another one down here. And then the last step. Guard dog. Last step is just to erase all of this. So also give a clean appearance and not lead anybody astray. And there you have it. Your added flare skirt.